So thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
So just for people that haven't seen, the TED Talk and read the Harvard Business Review article, who are you? Uh,
So, my name is Carol Fishman Cohen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of iRelaunch, and I took a career break myself and returned to work. And we work with companies who are interested in engaging with people who are returning after some kind of a career break, and also with individuals who are interested in returning to work.
hmm. And what kind of activities do you do at iRelaunch?
So at iRelaunch, we formed iRelaunch in 2007, and here in the US, we are the pioneering company in the career reentry space. And we are engaged in a few different ways. We run the iRelaunch Return to Work Conference, which is our flagship event, and we have run it 20 times since 2008 and have had over 5,400 people come.
Well,
And we've also run a whole range, over 260 programs and presentations, uh, and before over 30,000 people in aggregate. So we do a lot of presentations and programming. We also work with companies that are interested in setting up formal programs to engage with people who are returning to work after a career break, usually involving some kind of an internship-like experience, but also companies that want to hire relaunchers, as we call them, directly into full-time roles without a program. And we also have a national network of college and university alumni career services advisors who work with alumni of their institutions. And we provide webinars and events on strategy for returning to work after a career break.
hmm. And is there some kind of progress in the system so that you start in one end, or can you come in from the various angles, or how does it work?
Right. So we actually have a brand new product, and it's called Roadmap,
Hmm.
and it's a multimedia five-stage online product that is self-directed. So it's you can start from the very beginning, or you can decide that you're a little bit further along and you can jump in the middle.
Hmm.
So we have that kind of a self-paced
Hmm.
product, and we also, at our events, there are people in all stages of relaunching, as we
Hmm.
call it. Some people are very early stage and they don't even really know what they want to do.
Hmm.
We can talk about that later if you
Hmm.
want, but that's really one of the hardest parts of the process
Hmm.
is to realize that you need to go through a new career assessment and figure out exactly what you want to do.
Yeah.
It sounds obvious, but it's really important. And then there are people who are at our programs and events who are much further along. They have their resumes. They might have even applied for a job already and have come to an event to speak to an employer in person about that application.
Hmm.
So there's that piece. And then there are people in between,
Hmm.
in all different stages.
Yeah. So it's pretty heterogeneous kind of population or user
Yes.
group. Yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty interested in this. At this stage wherever people don't know what they want to do, and I read this the blog post that you posted for a while ago, and I thought that one was really good. And I also think that in our networking community, that's kind of a big problem a lot of the times, because like when you're coming from one country to another, it's not necessarily you know the case that you can just like transfer and start your career again. So like you might have to think about like, what can I do? So what kind of advice do you have in those kind of situations?
Mhm. Well, we actually think that, and I know that you're talking about an expat community primarily. And we think that the opportunity to have some sort of a break, to be a trailing partner or spouse, or be in some sort of an expat situation, it does provide you with an opportunity, because it's the first time that you probably allow yourself to step back and reflect on whether you were even on the right career path to begin with.
Yeah,
because we feel that, people sometimes, you just fall into some job right out of school and you take another job, and the next thing you know, you have a career, or maybe you're fulfilling someone else's expectations. And this second time around, you have the opportunity to evaluate, was I even on the right career path in the first place? Now, some people are very fortunate and they are on exactly the right career path to begin with, and they'll end up returning to something very similar to what they left. Then there are other people who maybe they loved what they were doing, but they have a different life stage now, and they can't just pick up and travel on a moment's notice or travel 50% of the time. So they might take a job that's related to what they did before, but not it's not exactly what they were doing. And then there are those people who realize they were not on the right career path to begin with, and they end up relaunching their careers in an entirely new direction. But the process of figuring that out, it's a career assessment process. Now, we have our own approach at iRelaunch. Before my co-founder and I founded iRelaunch, we co-authored a book together called Back on the Career Track. And in that book, we talk about the job building blocks worksheet, which is a process of looking at each of your prior significant work and volunteer experiences and breaking them into components and identifying which of those components you love the most and are best at. And then extracting those, and you put them in a pile. And if you go through that exercise for each of your prior significant work and volunteer experiences, you will end up with a pile of these extracted components, and then you can build back up a new career path for yourself. But I'm sure, as you well know, there are all sorts of career assessments people can use as resources to figure out exactly what they want to do. But the point is that we think it's important for people to ask themselves that question at this particular juncture before they just launch right back into a job search.
Do you have any examples of a person that have gone from, this kind of 180-degree, turnaround that you talked about? Some people are, completely shifting focus.
Well, we actually have a whole range of... Yes, we have a whole range of career transitioners. I can give you a great example. We had a lawyer, a litigator, who took a 4-year career break and wasn't sure what she wanted to do when she went back. Well, a friend of hers ended up in heading up a regulatory compliance role at a health research organization. And she said to our relauncher, why don't you come in and volunteer to see what you think about it and if it's interesting to you. So she did that. She came in and volunteered, really loved that new environment. And after a while, after she volunteered, they had her do a contract consulting assignment. And then she interviewed and got a permanent role heading up non-clinical trials for this medical research organization. So, we have, that's just one example of many. But, I myself did a transition. I took an 11-year career break. I was a financial analyst most of my career before my career break. And then when I went back, I skipped this step and I just thought, I'm just going to go right back into financial analysis. So I did. And it wasn't until I was well in that job that I realized, you know what? I'm not sure I want to be doing this all the time. So I did the job building blocks exercise. I realized the components of this job are, I love meeting with company management. I love that part. I love the business writing piece. I love writing up the investment opinion. I love presenting the investment opinion. But that solitary spreadsheet analysis role that I loved so much when I was 29 years old, well, at 42 years old, didn't love that part so much anymore. So that's one of the reasons I left what I returned to and started doing what I'm doing now, where I'm presenting and writing and meeting with people. So I made that shift myself.
How did you feel like, when you took that, that step, when you decided, this is what I want to do instead, like, because it's kind of like uncharted territory in some way, right?
Right. And, I wasn't really sure if it was the right thing. I thought, I guess I should first say that when I was back at that financial analysis job after 11 years out of the full-time workforce, I felt some conflicting feelings. At first, a part of me was so excited about this new phase in my life. It was like, it's happening, because when I was out for 11 years, and when in year 9, I was thinking, this was back in 1999. I relaunched my career in 2001. So in 2 years before that, it was 1999. Before anyone was talking about this, there was no media attention, no programs. I didn't know anyone else who had gone back to work. Everyone I knew who was home was still home. And so I was so excited that this new phase of my life was starting. I think I was also pretty nervous. I was feeling like, hope I can do this, and hope I can live up to everyone's expectations, including my own. And even when I figured out during the course of that year that maybe this is not exactly what I wanted to do, I had a great relationship with my employer, and maybe it was because I was 42 years old and not 29, that when it happened, I was pretty communicative with them about it, and they said, you know what, take your time, figure it out. We'll work with you. They couldn't have been more amazing. But I still tell people, don't make the mistake that I did, because here I involved a very progressive company that was willing to hire me after 11 years out, where if I had done that career assessment first, that wouldn't have happened. So that was a mistake. But it was also an opportunity for everyone. And then since then, when I made the transition to leave that job and then start iRelaunch, we didn't start iRelaunch right away. What happened first is we got a book contract to write back on the career track. So at first it was just, we're writing a book. And it wasn't until we got really into the book research that companies and academic institutions started asking us to give talks on our return to work and on the programs that we were starting to get involved in pre-recession. In 2004 to 2006. We were involved with companies and schools that were starting career reentry programs. That's ultimately what led to us forming iRelaunch. So although I'd love to say that it was a big, well thought out strategic plan, it didn't exactly happen that way. It really happened as a result of our book research.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So when the company started to come to you there in when you were writing the book, what was the things that they were interested in? Why did they want to work with you?
So I think they were pretty fascinated to hear about stories of two people who went back to work after long career breaks. In my case, I went back to a very prominent investment firm in a pretty intensive full-time job, and I don't think there was that many people doing that at the time. In fact, Harvard Business School wrote a case study about my return to work. And in part because I think I was the only person they were aware of who had actually done this, way back in 2001. Now, of course, we're seeing many more success stories, and it's a whole different world at this point. But at that time, it was entirely different. So they were very interested in hearing our stories. And then we had interviewed over 100. At the time, we were focused solely on women who had taken career breaks for childcare reasons. Now, when we're looking at the definition of relaunchers, we see men who take career breaks for childcare reasons, men and women who take career breaks for elder care, pursuing a personal interest, personal health issue, expats, retirees, veterans. So we're much broader in our focus now. But at the time, we had interviewed about 100 women who had returned to work in all different fields and work configurations after career breaks from 1 to over 20 years. And companies were interested in that. They were just discovering the pool and just trying to understand who are the people who are returning? What do these stories look like? What was the process? And then we had, Lehman Brothers, what had the Encore program. It was one of the first, it was the first corporate program for ex-finance professionals returning after a career break. We helped them source candidates. We presented in their program. We worked with Tuck, Dartmouth's business school, in the original focus groups for their back to business program. So we had a range of roles, and we had not even, that's what ultimately we formed the company in response to these kinds of requests. And now, especially with my TED Talk, I have a TED Talk that's been seen by over 1.5 million people. Every week we get inbound unsolicited inquiries from companies all over the world that are interested in learning more about how they can create their own program to engage with this population.
So that's the primary thing, that they want to create some kind of, relaunch program themselves in the firm.
Well, they're really interested in the pool, and in part because we've been able to demonstrate the quality, the consistent high caliber pool that companies do not want to miss out on. If they're recruiting from a whole range of hiring pools, this is one they should be tapping. There's no question. Exactly. And either they're going to engage by hiring them directly, or they are going to form some sort of a program. Maybe it has an internship. Maybe we've been involved in a few where they have a professional development day. They screen a whole bunch of people, 25, 30 people get to come. And it's a day where we make presentations, the company makes presentations, and then they recruit from that pool. And they don't have any formal internship. Others have some sort of an internship experience, and then others don't have a development day or an internship. They simply are interested in the pool and hire people directly from the pool into roles.
Okay, so then they go directly to a full-time role in the company.
Right.
Okay.
And that's actually where our iRelaunch Return to Work conference comes in, because companies that want to hire directly or companies that have these internship programs we'll have 600 people in New York all in one place, and all the companies sponsor, and we are a dominant source of successful candidates into these programs because of that event.
Yeah. And that those candidates are, the companies know that they are ambitious and really want to put a lot of effort into, actually coming back to work and so on. So, I mean, it's a good platform for them, obviously.
I mean, well, we have stats now because we've run the company 20 times. We know it's 93% female, 100% of them have undergraduate degrees, 70% have graduate degrees, 70% of them have worked for 10 years or more before their career break. Wow. It's an incredibly high caliber group. And because that's who shows up every time we have a conference, we feel very confident that the companies are going to be thrilled with who they're going to meet that day.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And when they have this internship, I know you have some kind of, they do some kind of project that becomes a part of the resume. Can you talk a bit more about how that project is usually designed and
Right. So we work with companies, either individuals or in groups, that are interested in offering some sort of formal internship program. So think about an internship program for university students, entry level, except these internships are all paid. They range from 9 weeks to 6 months, typically. Most of them are project-based, where the intern will be working on some sort of project or a set of projects during the course of their internship. Some of them are role-based, so they're in a role during the internship that is maybe a trial run in that role, and then if they're successful, they just remain in the same role. Whereas if they're in a project, at the end of, let's say 12 weeks is a typical length of an internship program. At the end of that 12 weeks, then if they're successful, they'd ultimately be placed in either the same division or area where they were doing the project, or maybe even a different one if they reviewed as someone the company wanted to engage with, and they would find the right role for them. So that's typically what happens. And the other thing that's important is just like an entry-level internship program. The mid-career interns come in as a group. They come in as a cohort, and they go through the program together. And that's very important, because if you think about it, there's no one else like them in the company.
No, exactly.
You know, they're unique, and so they have each other, and they're all going through this personal and professional transition at the same time. And it's to have that each other to sort of rely on as they are moving through this program is very helpful. And then some of the programs will include mentors or some professional development. There's usually some excellent orientation programs, weekly lunch and learns. They hear from executives in the company. They might get special presentations on like executive presence, or how to do a presentation, or some sort of special proprietary technology. So all of that can be wrapped up into the programming for these internship programs. And the other thing that's especially compelling about them is that now we have a critical mass of internship programs in the Wall Street financial services sector, and we also have 14 companies involved in an initiative that we at iRelaunch run with the Society of Women Engineers. It's called the STEM Reentry Task Force. We have 14 of some of the biggest companies in the world who have piloted or are now running reentry internship programs. And between the Wall Street programs and these STEM Reentry Task Force programs, we're seeing hiring rates out of these programs between 50% and 100%, depending on the program and the year. So we feel like those numbers are amazing.
Yeah.
And that's the other reason that companies are interested, is because if they believe that it's high risk to hire someone coming off of a career break, the internship lowers that perceived risk, because it allows the company, of course, to test out someone, to get a work sample, and they don't have to make the hiring decision until the internship period is over. So it's perceived as lowering the risk. And I mean, the reason I say perceived risk is we at iRelaunch don't believe people coming off career break are such risky hires, but some employers do. So anyway, so that is really is compelling, because they have that opportunity, and then the numbers. I mean, these hiring rates we're seeing are just pretty impressive.
Yeah, definitely. 50 to 100% is really good. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of causation between how something in the program and the hiring rate? Have you seen any patterns in terms of like what is usually a successful case, it's hard to say.
Well, there are characteristics. So first of all, the characteristics of the pool, just to begin with, are, as I mentioned, educated, experienced. They're people in their mid 30s to mid 50s, mature. There's a maturity. They're in a great life stage, a more settled time of life. If you're connecting with someone who's coming off of a career break, let's say for childcare reasons, fewer or no maternity leaves. They've done that already.
Yeah, exactly.
Fewer spousal or partner job relocations. So it's a more settled time of life. Plus, there's an energy and enthusiasm about returning to work, precisely because they've been away from it. And I can tell you this firsthand, having been through it myself, that in around year 9 of my 11-year career break, I remember thinking, I have no idea how I'm going to be able to return to work, but I'm really ready. I have to figure it out, because I really want to go back. So so that's another piece, is people come back really excited and ready to go.
Yeah. And I've heard that is a common question also, how do I, when you're coming back and you're sitting there with the interviewer and they ask you like about that break, how do you advise people to kind of approach that gap in the CV or whatever?
Right. So first I'll just tell you, and then I'll give you the actual answer.
Yeah.
So people should be very brief, but acknowledge that they took the career break. They should not apologize. And then they should move on to exactly why they're the best person for the job. So I would say back to you, if you said, wow, I see you took a 6-year career break here. Tell me more about that. I would say, yes, I took a career break to care for my children, and now I can't wait to get back to work. In fact, the reason I'm so excited about this particular position is when I worked for Company X, we faced very similar customer challenges. Let me tell you about one.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and you've probably talked about this before, but that also means that a person needs to have in their back pocket an anecdote from each of their prior significant experiences, so they can talk about these experiences as if they happened yesterday, and with some detail. So that means they need to practice. So not only do you have to recreate these experiences from the past, and I will throw in here that for your audience members who have children in their careers, children, tell them to document their milestone experiences, because if they take a career break later on, they'll have this file with information about exactly what was happening to them in the moment, as opposed to having to recreate the past, 15 years later. So you have to have that. And then we tell people, once they identify those anecdotes, they have to practice saying them out loud. You can't just think in my head, oh, here's how I imagine that interview is going to go, and here's how I picture myself. You have to stand in front of a mirror or a wall or another person and say the words out loud. And the more you practice, the better you'll sound, the more confident you'll feel.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. Yeah. And I mean, it relates also to this career assessment that we talked about before, making that list that you talked about. It's like, I can imagine that exercise in itself, really creates a foundation for this, kind of confidence. Because you talk about that also in the TED Talk, right? How like when you detach from the workforce, it's kind of like your self-confidence or self-worth or something is like, gradually kind of declining in some way, right?
Yes. It's so true. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you this happened to myself. The more professionally disconnected I felt, I experienced a diminished sense of self over time. And that is why you'll hear people who are on career break lose their confidence over time. It's because, we have a certain amount of our identity wrapped up in who we are as a professional. Definitely. And when we're not living that life, it will affect our confidence level. To get back in touch with people from the past, people with whom you worked or went to school, because they have a frozen in time view of you, and they remember you as you were. Even if your sense of self has diminished over time, they don't know about that. So that's another way to build your confidence. But your point about this career assessment and getting that clarity on exactly what you want to do and being able to talk about that in an articulate way and having to practice that out loud, that drives the whole rest of your relaunch. So it's really, really important.
Yeah. Do you have any other tips? Like you have that one, and then, thinking about how other people might not perceive you in kind of the way that you perceive, yourself in that stage. Do you have any other kind of tips in that position where you're kind of feeling, demotivated or something like that?
Right. So the two confidence builders are that frozen in time, getting back in touch with people from the past, hearing their enthusiasm about your interest in returning to work because they remember you as you were. And the other one is to get clarity on exactly what you want to do and practice talking about it. We say first with non-judgmental friends and family. The people who are in more of a judgment-free zone. Because when you first start talking about it, you're not going to sound that good. You need to practice. And they might give you feedback on, you could say it this way instead, or why don't you use this word to describe it, and then you can incorporate that. And the more practicing you get, the better you'll sound, the more confident you'll feel, especially when you get to the interview. So essentially, every one of these conversations that you have is an interview rehearsal. So the more of them that you have, the better you'll sound when it really counts.
definitely. I agree. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess it's time to start to wrap up. And we have, just some quick questions also that I know is common in this phase, and one is kind of related to these kind of interview questions that we talked about before, and one common thing is that you're like the kind of jobs that you find is usually like you're kind of overqualified for them, but in terms of like your CV, but you have this gap. So the gap is kind of making you're still overqualified, but you're not really. It's not. I don't know. It's kind of a hard situation. What do you advise people to do in those kind of cases?
Okay, so there are two questions here. First of all, I just wrote an article about this called 5 Reasons People Take Lower Pay When They Return to Work. And sometimes it's because some of us intentionally target a lower ranking and lower paying role than what we left for a range of reasons. So maybe we were not on the right career path to begin with, and we're relaunching in a new direction. We have to take more of an entry-level role. Maybe we simply want a less stressful job.
Yeah.
We've got a lot going on in our life, and we want to deliver excellent results to our employer and manage life outside of work. So we target a lower level pay, lower job. And that's a situation where someone might say to you, you seem really overqualified for this position.
Yeah.
And then the response is, it might seem to you like I'm overqualified for this position, but I intentionally sought it out because I thought long and hard about my life stage and what my life outside of work and my priority on delivering excellent results to my employer.
Yeah.
And I feel that I can achieve both at this level. So that's why I sought it out intentionally. So you're educating the person on that this was an intentional decision.
Yeah, exactly.
And we've had relaunchers use this language verbatim as they've moved through an interview process and get hired. Some managers will reject it out of hand. Others will just have never looked at it that way before.
Yeah.
And they will understand once you explain it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's important to not take the things that people say, just like face value. There's this like sales recruitment technique where they're just like rejecting the person the first thing just to see like if they try to change the objection to something good. Like, so I mean, it's kind of like I think both. I mean, these cases that you talk about now is like seeing it more like a negotiation rather than like just taking whatever they say face value. Yeah, and also if the company doesn't have like a formal internship program, maybe they don't have any roles up or anything like that. What do you advise people in those cases where there's no?
Right. So where there's no formal career reentry program or internship program. And I guess I should say that the word internship, we just use it as a catch-all term. There are some companies that don't like to use the word internship. So it really means any kind of short-term, non-binding work arrangement.
Yeah.
It could be a contract consulting role, a special project, covering a maternity leave. Temp work.
Yeah.
We tell relaunchers, don't shy away from temp work. It gets you in the door. And then you meet people, and when a job comes up, there you are.
Exactly.
But the reality is, as hard as we're working at iRelaunch to help companies to create these programs, most of them don't have them. That doesn't mean you can't propose the concept of an internship or internship-like arrangement. Especially in a situation where you're in an interview and the person might say, well, I think you're a great candidate, but there's no way I'll be able to convince my colleagues once they see that you're coming off of an 8-year career break.
Yeah.
And then that's your cue to say, I understand it might be hard to convince your colleagues about my candidacy, but what would you think and what would they think about if you engaged me for some sort of a special project or a contract role that was temporary, so you all could see a sample of my work, before you had to make a permanent hiring decision. So essentially, you're proposing the same concept, but on sort of a one-off special arrangement. And, again, there are some managers who will say, no, that will never fly here. And other managers will think, wow, I never thought about that. Let me talk to them. And we have seen relaunchers get their first foot in the door by having that kind of an arrangement that they propose themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So like basically just de-risking the process, or right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for the great conversation that we had. For the people that want to hear more about you and iRelaunch, what should they do?
So we have a website, iRelaunch.com.
Yeah.
We have a podcast, 321 iRelaunch. We have presence on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram. We have a brand new Facebook group, a private Facebook group called the iRelaunch Return to Work Forum. So any of those ways people can engage with us.
Perfect. And I will put all the links here down below when I post. Okay. So, all right.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks.